there is a lot of terminology in here that is very difficult to translate in Greek, so that was a challenge. Before we start, just for statistical reasons, how many of you know or think they know what prototyping means? Can you raise your hands? Okay. We will respond to that later on. I will explain everything, and you will get, I hope, a clear definition. Before we get there, let me introduce myself a little bit and the company that I'm representing. As Konstantinos said, I'm Konstantinos Vitoratos. I'm a marketeer by profession, so I'm actually involved in tech and IT only via my interactions with my colleagues and from the fact that I work in an IT and tech company. But I don't have any background in programming. My academic background, I have a bachelor's degree from Athens University of Economics and Business in Marketing, and I did my master's in destination management in University of Ljubljana. I did not follow that principle at all, destination management. I stuck to my marketing studies from Athens. So what I'm gonna talk about today a little bit before we start talking about prototyping is about our company, because I think it's important. All of you are studying here in Cyprus, many of you are Cypriots or are planning to live here and work here. I think it's important to hear success stories of Cypriot companies that managed to go out of the Cypriot borders to get a little bit inspired. And I think that our company is such a case, and that's why I like to talk to students about it a little bit. So our company is called Proto.io. And although if you go to our website, you might think that we're a startup because we like to present the company as such. Actually, the company dates back to 1998. Back then it was called SNQ Digital. It was essentially one of the first digital agencies in Cyprus, and it was one of the first companies that was making websites and other digital solutions for big companies in Cyprus, but also abroad. One of the biggest novelties of SNQ Digital was that they developed one of the first content management systems. The most famous content management system that you might know today is WordPress. But back then in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were not so many such solutions. So SNQ Digital was one of the first companies that got in that industry and managed to actually get clients in the early 2000s outside of Cyprus, in the UK, Italy, and Greece. So already the company went global in the early 2000s. So as with every technological company, I think it's important, and you'll see it in your careers as well, that companies need to adapt to new technologies and change and shift all the time. Same with us as employees, we need to learn new skills. So although the company was mostly active as a digital agency, at some point they decided to turn their activities towards software and essentially sell software. The idea for Proto.io, which is a prototyping tool, and it is what Proto.io does is mostly what I'm going to talk to you about today. The idea for Proto.io came from an internal need that the company had. So as a digital agency, the company needed to go and pitch websites, applications, and things like that to a lot of Cypriot clients, mostly, who did not really know anything about technology. It was very difficult to pitch ideas to them, and they would focus on details and not the bigger picture. So what the management back then thought was, what if we had a tool that we don't need to develop a whole website, we don't need to design everything from scratch, we don't need to spend months on a brief that might not go through. What if we can put something together in just a few hours, take it to the client, they say they like it or not, and then we know if we proceed or not. So they decided to work in the prototyping field. They created Proto.io in 2013, and Proto.io was also one of the first and pioneering prototyping tools. Today there is many, there is like probably even 30 of them in the market. There is a lot of competition, but back then it was one of the 1 or 2 or 3 tools that were available in the market. Also important to say that around that time, 2013-14, the company, since it was going more global, decided to also register in the US as an American company as well. So operations take place in Cyprus, and the company is also registered in the US, so we can do business with that side of the world as well. Then in 2018 we developed another product, again a software, it's called Overflow. We won't see much about this today. Overflow is a mapping and diagramming tool. So essentially, to give you a very simple idea of what that does, if you're a designer and you put together all the screens of an application that you want to create and develop, most applications have a lot of interactions and the map can look really huge of what the user can do, and it's very difficult to visualize that. So Overflow helps designers do that and have a visual map of all of the screens with arrows that show if you click on that button, you go to that screen and so on. Just a simple, quick explanation so you understand what Overflow does. So essentially, as a company, we consider our goal to be enabling product teams to build better products. We consider our solutions to be productivity tools. This is how we pitch them to our clients. This is how you're going to see us mention them on our websites, productivity tools. We have a focus on design, but also lately we're going the direction of AI as well, but hopefully next time that I'm here to present something similar again, I might also speak about AI, because now we're making our first steps in that industry. So let's go to our main topic. I don't want to take more time with introductions. So this is a talk for prototyping, but in the general sense of entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship. So I thought it was interesting to start this presentation by answering this simple question. Why did we decide to do a prototyping lecture for an entrepreneurship course? So how do prototypes help with entrepreneurship, essentially? So the thing is, every time that we have an idea, we need to validate that idea. It's never a good idea to go head first into any new industry or idea without having seen it, how it works, get some feedback. So usually it is a good idea to make a prototype so that you can get some early validation and prove if your concept is meaningful and can bring you money, essentially. So if it's viable financially. And this is something that prototyping helps with. And why does it help with that? Because essentially it helps companies and individuals save time, money, and other resources. So imagine this scenario. I have an idea. I don't know, let's say I want to make an app that designs the perfect table for the perfect case. I don't know. Very weird tables for very specific scenarios. To be able to pitch that, to get some funding, I would probably need to develop everything, do designs, do marketing a little bit, like see how the platform would look, UX, UI design, a lot of work. With a prototype, I can do that in a very quick way. I can make the shell of a presentation of an app or a website. It would take me 2 days instead of 2 months. I can do it by myself or just with a friend of mine who does a bit of design, just to make it look nice. And we can take it to a pitch, to an investor, and see, do they find it interesting? Does it make sense for them? Get some early feedback. We don't need to develop anything. We don't need to take it yet to the software engineers. So we save a lot of time and money. The other thing, now let's suppose that we are not an early stage entrepreneur, that we are a team that actually develops projects like the team that I work for. Very often we use prototypes so that we can align internally between design, marketing, developers, so that we see what needs to be built, estimate, how much time we need to spend, see what would be difficult to achieve, what is easier, and have some early conversations. So it's easier to align for teams as well when they have a prototype to look at. And the last thing, prototyping very often comes with options for testing. So you can actually, we will talk about this a little bit later in more depth. Prototyping often helps with testing, and there are many ways to do testing with prototypes. So that allows us to understand a little bit what our audience needs as well. And I don't just mean early feedback, as we mentioned before, early idea validation. I also mean deeper understanding. We can understand what they find difficult, what they find easy to achieve, if the UX is good of the application, and so on. So all of these things are the reasons why prototypes are important for entrepreneurial success. And this is why we tie this presentation to what you guys are doing through the Center of Entrepreneurship. Now, I asked you in the beginning if you guys know or think that you know what a prototype is. There are many definitions of what prototyping is. I'm going to give you our definition. I think it's kind of wholesome, but you might also find slightly different ones. So what I would say is that a prototype is a complete user experience without a fully developed product. So I can actually show you my whole idea or most of it. I can help you understand, you know, what I want to achieve with my app or my website, but I don't really do all of the back-end work and the front-end work that a normal website or application would require. So this is my definition of a prototype, but you will find many others out there. Doesn't mean that any of them is better than the other. This is just our approach as a company to it. Now, usually there is this misconception. If you remember, the title of this presentation was 5 prototyping decisions everyone needs to make. So up to here, this was all introduction. Now we're going to the actual topic, the 5 prototyping decisions from 1 to 5. So very often, product owners, when they think of prototypes, they try to think how detailed they should be. And they usually believe that, oh, you know, I have a designer in the team. We have strong design skills in our team, so let's just make a perfect prototype with amazing designs that looks amazing, finished, you know, take it to the client, make them like have a head explosion, you know, and just like, you know, achieve all of our goals. This is a very common misconception that leads to the first decision that I want us to talk about. So the first question we need to make a decision on is, what level of visual fidelity do we need for our prototypes? I'm going to explain all of the vocabulary you might not know in this question. What is visual fidelity? Visual fidelity means the quality of the design, essentially. The design quality of our prototype. So also this question could be, what level of design quality do I need for my prototype? Just in the industry we call it visual fidelity. It's good for you to hear these terms and get exposed to them because you might work in the future with designers and you're going to be hearing these a lot. So I have examples here of the different types of visual fidelity or visual quality for apps. This is what we would call in the prototyping industry a low visual fidelity prototype. As you can see, the designer or even someone with just good sketching skills just essentially drew the screen of an app. And you can do this on a piece of paper, you can do this anywhere, scan it on your computer, whatever you want. The fact that it looks like this doesn't make it not useful or not meaningful, because it takes very little time and it can actually give you a very good idea of what you have in mind. So let's not dismiss, you know, hand sketches when we speak about prototypes. They can actually be useful. Medium fidelity is a very common level of visual fidelity for prototypes. Essentially, it's what we call a wireframe. You might have heard that term. A wireframe of an app is essentially the same screen as the left. So all 3 screens that you will see on your screen here are going to be the same app, just on different visual fidelity. The medium one, as you can see, is digitized, so everything has been made digitally. Just instead of like having the images, we have placeholders. You know, everything, the icons are all kind of like digital. We have added some text, even if it's lorem ipsum, just to show maybe what fonts we want to use, you know, things like that. So essentially, a medium fidelity is a wireframe. These are quite common as well in prototyping. And then we have the high visual fidelity, which essentially looks like a finished app. Like this could be on anyone's phone. As you can see, this app, and you're going to see it in later slides as well. This is an app for sofas, like an online store, let's say, to customize your own sofa. So this also happens to be the sample project that we have on Proto.io for people who start using the product and want to do the tutorial. So is this clear up to this point, that we have these 3 levels of visual fidelity and that all 3 of them can be meaningful and useful? Is that understandable? All right. So that was the first decision we had to make. What is the visual fidelity? I'm gonna mention a second question now, and then I'm gonna bring these two questions together for the third one. So I'll be going a little bit back and forth for you to understand my logic. So keep visual fidelity on the one side, what we just saw. The second question, what level of interaction fidelity do I need? So think of an application on your phone. An application on your phone is the image, and it's what you can do with it. Tapping, you know, like swiping, all of these little actions, scrolling. These are called interactions. So when we make a prototype, we need to think of what visuals we need and what interactions we need. These are the two main components of every prototype. So we need to decide on what interaction fidelity we also need. And to nobody's surprise, as we had low, medium, and high in the previous screen, we also have here. I will play this now, and I want you to pay attention to one screen at a time and see what the differences are. So don't try like to go back and forth between them. Digest what happens in one, then go to the second, then to the third, and I'm going to explain as well on top of that. So spend a few seconds on the low fidelity one. As you can see, the low fidelity one only has one interaction applied to it. Anywhere I click on the screen, the only thing I achieve is that the couch changes color. There is only one interaction here. The medium one, it's not just anywhere that I click. I need to click to the specific dot with a specific color for the couch to change color. And then on the high fidelity, I have added many ways to do this. You can click on the buttons, you can swipe right and left and change the couch colors as well. Everything is clickable, the heart icon. So this is like a finished kind of like prototype that looks really like a real product, like what the user can do. Again, like before, all of these are valid and are meaningful for different purposes. What each purpose is for these things, we're going to see in the next question. I just want to leave you a few more seconds to understand what we did here. So again, the first one, just a simple, wherever I click in the screen, the only thing I achieve is one thing. The second one, a bit more detail. I want to show people how this carousel works, how this color selector works. And then here, the whole screen, I can do like everything a real user can do in many different ways. I can click, or I can tap, or I can swipe, and so on. So, I mentioned before, a prototype comprises visuals, interactions, these two things. We are combining them now for the third question, which also brings the component of time in it, because prototyping can happen in many different stages when we build a product. Not only necessarily when we have an early idea, but also later on in the process. So the question is simple. When should I prototype? And I'm going to add another question below. And what should my prototype look like based on the time when I prototype? So to bridge visuals and fidelity. When should I prototype? And what would the prototype need to look like, essentially? So I have created here a visual matrix. On this axis, you have the visual fidelity. Low, sketches, the wireframe, and the finished design. And imagine these as being the interaction that you tap anywhere in the screen, the interaction where you can tap on the colors, and the finished all interactions in one screen. So visual fidelity, interaction fidelity, yes? We're going to be using this matrix in the next slides, so try to spend a few seconds to understand what it shows. And I'm going to give you some cases. Case number one, to bring the component of time, as I mentioned here as well. I'm at the early stage of product development. I am a young entrepreneur. I have an idea. I have no clue if it makes any sense. I have not pitched it to anyone for funding. I just spoke about it maybe with a couple of friends, maybe with my university professor. And I need a proof of concept, and I also need to test different alternatives. I need to have 2-3 versions of my app to see what works better, what doesn't work as well. So once I click this button, colors will appear on this matrix. The dark orange one means that it's ideal in terms of like combination of visuals and interactions. The yellow one means that it works. It's not ideal, but you can do it. And then the ones that stay gray means that it's not recommended to go there. So let me ask you now, being an early stage entrepreneur, I have no information, I want to test things out, I don't want to spend too much time, I don't have resources, I don't have money, and all of these things. What kind of combination of visual and interaction fidelity would you guys pick? Anyone? Just raise your hand. Yes.
Based on if I have any set of particular skills, maybe the first level, or maybe one box above or one box towards the right.
So you're thinking something like this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Correct. Yeah. So the ideal scenario is this, just because you might not have the skills, so it's safe for everyone. Anyone can do that. Anyone can sketch something, copy something they see and like on another app, on a sketch. Doing simple interactions is very simple on any prototyping tool. Even design tools now have some basic interactions. It's very simple to just tap on the screen and go to the next one. You can set it up even without being a designer or a developer. And depending on your skills and understanding of the industry, you can go also a little bit further than that. But I don't recommend going even further than that, because you're going to spend too much time and you might just waste your time. If you want to do it just to practice, sure. If you want to do it to get good grades for your university course, sure. But just for a very quick proof of concept, not really needed. Like, it's going to be a bit of a waste of time. So now I give you the answers in the next ones. Second scenario. I work in a small team or in a company, and we have designers, or I am the designer, and we already have designs. The designs are finished. We know what we want to build. The designs are finished, so by default we go to the high level of visual fidelity. And I just want some feedback on the last details before I send this to the developers. Here we recommend adding a little bit of interaction fidelity, because it's going to help people understand the design a little bit better. Because for people to give you feedback on design for apps and websites includes a lot what we call user interaction and user experience. So to understand this a little bit better, you need to add at least a medium level of interaction, so that I understand, why did you put these 3 buttons there? I don't get it. So, you know, it's easier to add, for example, here, that color picker. But you can also go any other way depending on the team, the skills, and what you want to achieve. Another scenario, I think this might be the last one. Again, I work with a team, or I have a small team, or I work with external developers, software engineers, and I have gotten approval for my product, and I want to basically do a handoff to the developers, explain to them I want to build this, this is what I want to achieve, this is what I want the user to get, and this is what you guys need to build for us. In this case, again, it's ideal that the design goes on the higher end so that the developers can understand. If you are missing elements of the design, so for example, if I don't have the image of the couch there, it doesn't really change much for the developer. They can put like something, you know, like a benchmark kind of image. So that's why I'm saying that you can go mid-visual fidelity as well, but you cannot go lower than that, because the developer won't know what you want to achieve. And because we are doing a handoff, what is the most important for the developer is to know, if I click here, what happens. So we need to have all of the interactions of that app in our prototype, so that they can actually bring it to life for us, code it, and make it happen. Because, for those of you who might not know, a prototype is good enough to show people things and, you know, get approvals and get feedback, but they're not real apps. Like, I cannot put them on the App Store. So essentially, they're just shells of a product that look really nice, right? It's like these model homes that you might see, but there's nothing inside. There's no, you know, plumber work, there's no electricity, like nothing. Nobody can live in there. So to do that, we need developers to actually develop the application. Is everything clear so far? If anyone has any question, you can just raise your hand anytime, and I will be happy to repeat anything. Okay. So, to summarize until now what questions we had: question 1, visual fidelity. Question 2, interaction fidelity. Question 3, when to prototype and what type of prototype do I need based on the timing. Then the fourth question, which tools shall I use? Maybe for you guys this is not like yet or won't be for a while a real question, but because usually prototyping solutions are aimed for designers, UX and UI designers, this is a very common question we get, especially when we go to conferences. People just ask, why do we need a prototyping tool? We use a design tool like Figma or Sketch, and we can do basic interactions and we can make our designs and show them to the client there, and it's fine. Like, we can get some basic feedback. So although this might not be a real question for you, you might actually end up working in a team where your designers might be unsure what tools to use. So it's good for you to have that passive knowledge, to have an opinion, I think. So the options are usually two when we talk about prototypes: design tools and specialized prototyping tools. I don't know if you're familiar, but yeah, I mentioned already some of the most popular design tools are Sketch, Figma, and some others. There are also prototyping tools like Proto.io, there is ProtoPie, there is many Framer, there is like many prototyping tools. So let's start from design tools and see what they can do well. So in the design tool, I can design a low fidelity screen, so one that doesn't have a lot of details. I can design a high fidelity screen that looks like a finished design. I can make a simple click-through prototype. That means a low interaction prototype, like the one I showed you before, that you could click anywhere on the screen and go to the next screen or change the color of the couch, but only low interaction fidelity. If I need feedback from people, they have functionality to share a link with your stakeholders, get their feedback. They can leave comments usually. You can talk through the design tool. You don't need to necessarily have a Zoom or something or a meeting with them. So yeah, you can get the written feedback. And design tools also don't require coding skills. You don't need to be a developer. As long as you know design though, you need to know design to use the design tool. You can actually create all of the above things in the design tool. Now, when it comes to these parameters, prototyping tools lack in one of these, let's say, cases, which is designing high fidelity screens. So actually, the high fidelity prototypes that I showed you before, the finished one with the beautiful couches and stuff, we brought input from a design tool into the prototyping tool. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to design proper app-like interfaces in a prototyping tool. Usually you need to combine them to achieve a final result that has high fidelity screens and high interaction fidelity, which only the prototyping tool can give you. So if you want to achieve that perfect result, you need to combine both. But now I have some extra things that the design tools are really lacking. So as I mentioned before, to use a design tool, you need to be a designer. There is no other way. I have very often tried to use Figma and Sketch because it's part of our work sometimes. And to an extent I can, but I usually need the designer to have some file ready for me and I can then just like play around with it and change a few things, but I can't really start from scratch. It's very chaotic, like if you don't have that knowledge. Then most design tools don't have ready-to-use assets, things that you can drag and drop, like templates, things like that. You need to usually build things from scratch or buy them from another source on the internet and import them. Design tools don't have any audio, video elements. You can't really work with these in a design tool. You need different tools to do that. You cannot make micro animations, so very specialized, like interesting animations that look very crisp and very finalized. You can do very basic things. You cannot add conditional logic. So for example, in a prototype, it might be that if the user came from that screen and then clicks on that button, take them to that screen. If they click on the other button, take them to the other screen. Design tools cannot give you that level of granularity. And also design tools don't allow for user testing capabilities, which we will get to later, more about user testing. And as you can imagine, prototyping tools have these things. So essentially, what I always say is, if prototypes are very important for your business, if you use them a lot, if you need high visual, high interaction fidelity prototypes, you definitely need to use prototyping tools. The other case where you might need to use a prototyping tool over a design tool is if you really don't know anything about design and you want to make wireframes using templates. Prototyping tools offer you that possibility. You can make medium fidelity, nice enough prototypes just by dragging and dropping elements and building your own prototype. I will show you at the end of the lecture a couple of our videos, short ones, just so you see what I mean by that, like pulling things in and so on, so that you understand a little bit how that works. So the last question is about user testing that I mentioned already from the beginning, and it came up a couple of times. How should I get feedback? This is the last decision you need to make when you build a prototype, how to get feedback. And there's a few ways to do it. We're going to go quickly through each one of them. But first of all, let me give you a little bit of statistics. It has been proven that only 5 users, like actually working with 5 users on feedback, can reveal 85% of the problems that your app or website might have. And this is like, it's really important because very often when thinking about user testing, people tend to feel a little bit in chaos, like it's going to take so much effort, it's going to be so expensive, it's going to be so time consuming. Very often what you need is 5 people, or less even, to get like some conclusions. So don't really see user testing as something that is like a drag or like something annoying. It can actually be easy and fun and give you a lot of insights. What I say is that some testing is better than 0 testing. Just do any testing, like ask one person, ask 2 people. Don't leave it completely to luck, because it will not get you far with your entrepreneurial ideas. Do a little bit of testing and see where it can take you and what ideas it might give you. So now, when it comes to user testing, I guess you guys have also had probably some classes, related to how to do questionnaires maybe, or sample selection and so on. I know in marketing I did, we had a few courses about that. So essentially, when you make a prototype or when you want to pitch an idea or get some feedback, you need to ask yourself, who is my sample? Who needs to see this? Who needs to give me feedback? I will give you some cases, like I did before. The first case is you can do user testing with friends, family, and colleagues. So people that you know and you are familiar with and comfortable with. And there are pros and cons to all of these approaches, so we're going to go through the pros and cons of each one. So working with your friends, family, and colleagues, the pros, it's free. At least I hope so, if your friends really like you, that they don't ask for money to give you advice. It can give you some confidence in the sense that, like, it's people that you know. Most likely they will tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to be upfront about it. Like most of our friends, family, and colleagues usually give us more positive feedback. They're more biased sometimes. But there are cases where you might need that confidence boost. So let's keep it as a positive, but with a bit of a question mark, because you also need to question, are they telling me what I want to hear, or what I should hear? And also it's time efficient, because friends, family, colleagues will make the time to hear you, see you, talk to you. It's easier to schedule a coffee with them or just a meeting with them. The cons, the sample is usually small, and usually, I don't know if you guys have felt that in your lives, but we all kind of live in bubbles. Like our friends and family and colleagues are people similar to us. So our sample is usually limited, not only in terms of like size, but also in terms of like interests and lifestyle. So we tend to get a limited sample. Very often you might see that they're not end users. Like for example, when I told you about this silly app that pitches the perfect table for the perfect solution, maybe most of my friends don't really need a very special table. They just need a simple table to eat like dinner. They might not do a very special job that requires a specific table. So in that sense, They might give you some feedback on the design, the look, the idea, but they might be like, but to be honest, I wouldn't use it because it's not what I do. And what I mentioned before, they're potentially biased. They're going to tell you what you want to hear most of the time. So that can be a con as well. Okay, let's go to the next type of sample that you can work with. You can work with recruited users out of your existing user base. That only works if you have an app that works, or if you're an established company that has some clients. You know, you have a product that people have used. Either they pay for it or they use it for free, but for sure they have some experience with it. So let's say in which case you might need to use this. You might want to, for example, ask them for their feedback on a new feature that you want to introduce to your application. You have an application, they've been using it for a year, all good, but then you're like, what if I add gamification to this app? Would they like that? And you need feedback on that. So you go to your existing users. The pros of this approach, it's usually free or cheap. Most of the users in our experience, because we have done user testing with our existing users, most of them are happy to do it completely for free because they feel like they're going to get an early kind of like peek into what's coming in the application, or also they feel that their feedback is going to help improve the product, or they can pitch us their ideas of how to improve the product. So they like to have this one-on-one time to just like, you know, tell us, by the way, you guys, would you mind doing this as well? So they usually do it for free. Some of them, they might ask for some, not money, but for some type of exchange, like a discount maybe on their next month's fee or something like that. Another pro, and maybe that's the most important one, product familiarity. They know the product, they care for it, you know, they want to see it get better, so they can give you feedback that is really crucial. And the last pro is that by speaking to your existing user base, you connect with your users, you get to know who they are, they start liking you, they see the person behind the app, and you'd be surprised how much easier it is to talk to them again for another favor in the future once you have chatted with them before. So it's good to actually make contacts with your own users and get to know them a little bit. Now the cons. It's harder to schedule. Most of them are probably going to be people in the industry, working, you know, they will not prioritize you. They're going to be like, okay, let's meet next month. You know, in some countries, especially in the West, people tend to have very rigid schedules, and it's very hard to find time slots to talk to them. Then there is confidentiality issues, which are easy to solve actually, because you can ask your users to sign an agreement that they will not disclose anything of what you're going to share with them, because of course you don't want them to talk to your competition and just like tell them, oh, by the way, Proto.io is planning this feature, you guys should do it first. So, you know, there is this confidentiality issue, but if they're fine to sign an agreement, then it's solved. And it also builds expectations. So we have had cases where we told people clearly, we are not sure this is going to come live, we are planning it, and then it doesn't actually go to fruition, and they complain, but why didn't you guys bring this feature, you know, live? We liked it a lot in the testing. So that is also like a con. They might get a little bit disappointed that they cannot really get that new feature. Now, the last case is we can recruit people via a user testing platform. So there are actually platforms out there that are standalone products that you pay a fee, and they can find people based on your criteria. You can give them demographics, you can give them job type, description, and so on, place where they might live in the world, the size of the household, things like that, and they can find you, user testers, based on your brief. The pros of this approach, you have a huge variety. You can essentially just go wild, just tell them, I don't know, I just want Asian women in the USA living in California, and they will find them for you. Like, you can just like think of a very specific demographic, and they will find it for you. And also it's time efficient, because essentially all you need to do is write a brief, and they will take care of finding the sample for you. You don't need to, and very often they actually run the testing all by themselves as well. Like, they can also do that. And then the cons, of of course, it's expensive. It's by far the most expensive approach. You would only do that probably if you're an established company that you want to achieve something big and new, and you are planning to spend a lot of money and you want to be sure that your investment makes sense. So this is when you would probably take this approach. And the other con is that although you might find very specific sample, they still might not be aware of your product. Like, sure, I might want to have prototyping users, but maybe the company that does the user testing struggles to find prototyping users. They might find users who use another prototyping tool, so they kind of know what we do, but they know it from another angle. So there might be a little bit of a disconnect there. So that's that with this as well. So essentially, this is the main presentation. Thank you. Yeah, happy to take questions and happy to discuss further on this topic. Last time people had very interesting questions. First of all, was everything clear and understandable? Yeah? Okay. Yeah?
When you mentioned, I think at the first and second question about fidelity and about the visual effects, doesn't it depend though on what you are doing? If your selling point, for example, is a certain certain function of your application, you can go with low visual fidelity, but you will need the interaction to be as high as possible. So,
Yeah.
like your company that does prototypes, how do you take that into account?
So essentially, I think that anything is valid. Any combination between these and the interactions, anything on that matrix, essentially, let's go back to the matrix. I think that's the... Anything on this matrix is valid, depending on where you are, what you do, what your product is, and even what you feel like doing. I have to be honest, like there are times that you just get a bit carried away and you want to do the interactions because it makes sense at the time. What I'm kind of like giving you here is general advice based on how to make the maximum of your time and effort. It doesn't mean that if you do something outside of this scope, it's wrong or it's bad. For us, because we're a very design-forward company and we address designers, we always end up having high-fidelity designs because we need them. Because our audience needs to see crisp products. They would not be happy with seeing a sloppy website. So we need to always include high-fidelity designs, but very often, when we start, for example, the process and we just have a first meeting, we might just do the sketches. So actually for us, things develop as time goes usually. So we kind of like go across both axes with time. Like we start low and we start going all the way up. Other companies, they might just do one of these things and stop prototyping altogether. They might feel happy with what they have. I think it's about like doing it the way you feel works for you. I think that what you should take from this lecture is that the possibilities are endless, but... And then the next one is a very short tutorial about templates, so you understand what I said about if you're not a designer, you can build something that makes a little bit of sense in a prototyping tool. So let's start with the promo video.
Just watch how I do it. How I do it. Just watch how I do it. How I do it. Just watch how I do it. How I do it. Just watch how I do it. How I do it. I'm classic, fantastic, abracadabra, I'm magic. And I'm sending out these good vibes in electric waves. Take a ride with me and we're walking on these golden rays. Ain't anything like you ever seen before. I'm everything and more. I got to show you what I'm all about. I got something I got to show you how. I got to show you what I'm all about. I got something for you.
I wanted you to see this video is because it's interesting. It's interesting to see the different types of like things. So for example, here, where it says take your prototype to the next level, you can see that like we have built like micro animations here. You can like add audio in this, like you can actually play. Let me turn off the volume so that you can actually like play actual songs, you know. It would work. You know, you have, for example, mid-fidelity here, where you can just put together a very quick website and just write, edit the texts and so on and so forth. So this kind of gives you an idea that like there is a wide variety of things you can do on the prototyping tool. Here gives you a very quick idea of how you can work with templates, which might be useful for students like you or like me, that I'm a marketeer, I don't really know much about design.
Alternatively, instead of creating a new screen first and then dragging a template into it, you can speed up your workflow
I'm gonna pass something because they're a bit like
using
technical.
Control plus Shift plus G or Command plus Shift. We'll click on any group in the templates text on the canvas and type in your preferred text. To change the colors, select individual elements to access their color properties.
So you see, it kind of looks like a design tool a little bit, but it's
If
like
you want to add new
simple to
content,
use it.
it's worth noting that most template kits contain individual
These are all
elements
templates
such as
here.
text blocks, headers, and
You can
buttons
drag
that
them.
look similar to the ones used by the template. Use those instead of the default
And
proto
like,
IO
it's
components
not
to
like,
effortlessly achieve.
most prototyping tools are the same, so I'm not doing this just to push our product. Like, you can find this more or less in any prototyping tool. My point is that it's a good solution because you have a lot of content you can work with, and they have all of the, you know, little icons that you find on your iPhone, your Android, like everything. You don't need to look for them on Google, like, give me the heart icon, give me the card icon, like things like that. So, more or less, you can build good enough like prototypes just by yourselves. And if you ever have like any, you know, paper for university or any project that you need to build, try to build a prototype. Like you can start a free trial on Proto.io, on any other prototyping tool, play with it. It's fun, it's interesting. Like you can actually do a lot of things. All of the tools offer free trials, and so you know you can just play with it. Make a prototype, see how it works for you, do your own thing. Yeah. Other questions about the lecture? I think I can share the lecture. It has a lot of animations, but I can make it into a PDF. It will be static. I'm gonna send it to Konstantinos. He can pass it on to you guys so that you can have everything. I can also send him like a couple of interesting links, maybe, you know, from our website or something, resources that you might want to read, just so you can educate yourself more. And then it's up to you if you want to, you know, test this out, see if it works for your entrepreneurial efforts in the future, and so on. That's that. If there is anything else, that will be it.